Is Taiwanese a Chinese language?
Sounds like a simple question, right? Wrong. This seemingly straightforward query is a linguistic rabbit hole that will make you question everything you thought you knew about China and even the words we use. Trust me, the answer is way more mind-bending than you can imagine. To show you what I mean, let's play a little true or false game. Don't worry about getting it right. Just pay attention to how these statements feel. First up, in the orange group we have, Trump is an American man. Well, true, no arguments here. But what about this? Gabriel Garcia Marquez is an American writer. Technically, he spent most of his life in Latin America, but something just feels off here, doesn't it? That's because when we say American, we're often referring to someone from the United States, a political entity. And also, if we say Pocahontas is an American woman, now this feels even weirder. Why? Because
when Pocahontas, you know Pocahontas, right? Who is Pocahontas? Sorry? Okay, so Pocahontas is the woman who can sing with all the colors of the wind, okay?
When Pocahontas was alive, there was no United States. She can't be American in the same way Trump is. But watch this. If we say Pocahontas is a North American woman, suddenly it clicks. We have shifted from a political identity to a geographical fact. See the difference? Now, one more in the blue group. Caesar is an European emperor. Sounds about right, geographically speaking. But then Caesar is an Italian emperor? That just feels wrong, doesn't it? Why? Because Italy as a nation didn't exist when Caesar was ruling. It's a historical mismatch. So what's the takeaway here? The orange group statements are about identity or nationality, something political. The blue group is purely geographical, no political strings attached whatsoever. Now, here is the million-dollar question. When I ask, is Taiwanese a Chinese language? Which group does this question fall into, orange or blue? Well, your gut might be saying, well, it's just like when we say Xi Jinping is a Chinese politician. We get that, no problem here. But hold on a second, what about this? Confucius is a Chinese philosopher? Is that the same kind of Chinese? Could Confucius have been a member of a nation called China? Nope. The first time that piece of land was united into one single empire was centuries after Confucius was dead. So, if China in any political sense did not exist when Confucius was alive, how can he be Chinese the same way Xi Jinping is? It's just historically impossible. This means the only way I can make sense when I say Confucius is a Chinese philosopher is only if Chinese is being used in a purely geographical sense, just like saying Caesar was European or Pocahontas was North American. Intriguing, right? This here, my friend, is the tricky part. The word Chinese is ambiguous, and not just any kind of ambiguity. It's often used in a deliberately misleading way, which we call an equivocation fallacy. Think of it like this. Only man, which means human, is rational. And no woman is a man, which means a male. Therefore, no woman is rational. Ridiculous, right? Although my dad might agree if he was still around, but not me. Anyway, the trick here is the shifting meaning of man. And the same also happens with the word Chinese. They say Confucius is a Chinese philosopher and Xi Jinping is a Chinese politician. Therefore, they are both Chinese people. But by saying that, they're implying that these two figures living 2,500 years apart are both part of the same continuous nation, which historically just isn't true. If you remember, China didn't exist in any political sense when Confucius was alive. This statement looks true because they're playing on the double meaning of the word Chinese. A, someone who just happened to live on that piece of land that is now known as China. And B, someone who is actually a member of the modern nation known as China. So when did this political entity we call China actually came into being? You might be surprised to hear this, but China as a nation, the way we understand it today, is relatively young. We're talking around 1911. Yes, you heard that right. China is not 5,000 years old, nor 2,000, but just a little bit over a century old. Now, I didn't just pull this out of thin air. This fascinating idea comes from a book called The Invention of China by former BBC journalist Bill Hayton. And no, he's not talking about inventing gunpowder or stir-fried noodles, no. He's talking about how the idea of a unified Chinese nation, the Chinese language, and even Chinese people themselves were, in many ways, constructed over time. He wrote this book because he was wrestling with the very same ambiguity that we're now exploring. Okay, now we have identified the problem, the sneaky equivocation fallacy with the word Chinese. So how do we disarm it? Well, the trick is to replace the ambiguous word in one of the statements with a more precise term. Remember our man-woman example? We can swap one word out and say only human is rational. That breaks the false connection. And that's where things get really interesting, because now we know we need a word to swap Chinese out and disarm the fallacy. I started thinking, do we have a word in English that means geographically from the area we now call China without any of the modern political baggage? And if we don't, maybe it's time we invented one. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I give you Winchi. Think of it like NIMBY, which means not in my backyard. Winchi simply means what is now China. For example, as a Taiwanese, I have ancestors who came from Winchi. See how it works? It's purely geographical, no political implications needed. Alright, armed with our new linguistic tool, we can finally answer the question we started with. Is Taiwanese a Chinese language? My answer. Taiwanese has a Winchi origin. It's not a Chinese language in a modern political sense. And you know what? I think we'd be much better off referring to Confucius as a Winchi philosopher. What do you think of Winchi? Will you be adding it to your vocabulary? Let me know in the comments. Maybe we can even start a hashtag Winchi trend and finally have a clearer way to talk about history and language. And if you find this mind-bending, please like the video, share it with anyone who has ever been confused by the word Chinese. Thanks for watching. 真感謝咱來收看，咱後擺閣再會。